yes. We are back into recording Mondays. You realize this, right? It's been a bit off cadence as of late. No? You didn't realize?
No.
No. Okay.
The weeks just come and go. It's just a flurry by now. We went sledging this weekend.
Yeah, nice.
It's so funny. Just, my mom has like a sledge, which she brought home from her mom. So my grandma, she's like 90 or something like this. And the sledge is, I think, as old as my mom, basically. And we had the sledge and we put our kids on it. And it's insane how a little bit of snow, then this piece of
wood
basically.
Yeah.
And you put 3 kids on it.
Instant fun.
Fun immediately.
Yeah.
And then at first was like, no, I don't know. And then they sit down. It's like, I'm scared. And then you go and it's like, faster.
Yeah.
Faster. No, it was really fun. And so we kind of, so this is in Berlin, Potsdam kind of area. So there's no mountains. Forget about it. But we found like little mini hills.
Yeah.
Where they could basically kind of slide down.
Yeah.
It was good fun.
So down Kurfürst and down and then... No.
That's it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That was exactly what happened. So we had a bunch of time. I was there with my, summer loafers, basically in the snow.
In shorts.
Yeah, pretty much. No, it was my older son and then his 2 nieces.
Yeah.
Who are twins.
Oh, I see what you did. You're setting us up. You thought about this for change, not just leaving me to do all the hard work.
So
here.
do the hard work now.
Twins. How am I gonna do? No. So we're gonna talk a bit about one of the biggest pains folks have is execution. It was in OpenView's benchmark.
Yep.
We talked about it in the previous episodes. I'm not going to go too deep on that, but go-to-market execution is one of the biggest challenges. What we're going to run through today is a 3-step process that's going to help ensure solid execution. And it starts with a twin.
Yes.
Fun fact.
Starts with a twin.
Starts with a twin.
So, many of you might not know this concept, so let's spend a little bit of time on this maybe.
Yeah.
There's a concept that's been growing up in, I would say in the consulting world a lot.
Yeah, engineering.
In like VCs love it. Basically the concept of a digital twin. Right? So, is this another AI thing? Maybe, I don't know. I'm not sure about it, but largely no. Yeah. So digital twin as it is. What is it, Mikkel? Tell me.
One of the first, when you read about the concept, one of the first that actually appeared was from NASA. When they had, was it the Apollo 13 mission? Something went sideways. And to fix the problem and salvage the mission, what NASA had was actually an exact replica of the air shuttle down on Earth. So the engineers could actually inspect and say, okay, this is how you could go about fixing it, right? It's obviously not a digital thing. It was a physical twin they had, but it's just to portray the power of having a twin in that scenario, right?
Yeah.
So today, when you look at it, it's big in, I will say, engineering. So not in our tech SaaS startup world, but think about building a medical facility for $1 billion.
Mm-hmm.
A lot can kind of go wrong, but actually building a digital twin of the facility enables you to find some of the problems before you actually start constructing.
Yeah, and it's not just a blueprint or it's not just electricity or something like that. It's kind of, you want to get as close to the final end result as possible. And then you want to, in this context, I guess, want to, run a couple of experiments. Does it actually work like this and like that and so forth, right?
Yeah.
So it's for them, it's a really cheap way to make sure that the end product is going to work as expected.
Exactly. And I think if you look at windmills, it's actually a thing that's being heavily used there because when you look at windmills...
So exciting.
Windmill. They're fairly identical. They're super expensive, though, to build. But the placement is going to be different. You can place them offshore, so on the ocean or in the mountains or on plains. And the temperatures are going to vary. The winds are going to vary. There's so many things that changes. So what do to build the twin? They place sensors all over the windmill, and they basically, pass that information to a digital twin so they know how does the windmill perform? What is the output with different, variables, so temperature, wind, all that stuff. And it enables them to optimize when they're going to go and build a new windmill farm, how they're going to fit it, how they're going to, basically make sure it runs optimally.
And in their case, right, this is also, they kind of placed a couple of sensors everywhere, right? Which is another way to translate information.
Yeah.
That's feeding the digital twin. And what's happening there is you have those sensors going on, and they kind of receive this information. They run through the digital twin, and the digital twin then expects kind of, hey, this is how that should be behaving.
Yeah.
But then what comes as a next input from the sensor is actually that it isn't behaving like such, which is then actually helping them to figure out which windmills to kind of maintain first, right?
Yeah.
Kind of send maintenance crews to. So it's a very sophisticated monitoring capability that they're basically deploying there, where if you just had a sensor of like, hey, does it still go around? Yeah, yeah, it does.
Yeah.
But does it go as fast as you needed it to based on the wind and the humidity and, all of these other things that might play a role? No. Okay, well, that might give us a clue that there's something wrong here, right?
Yeah.
So we need to send a crew out. And otherwise, you wouldn't have noticed this. You would have, that problem would have, manifested until the thing was broken. Then you would send the crew out. I think another maybe more exciting one is Formula One. Back to Formula One. So I think McLaren actually built a digital twin of their. I mean, they're not one of the top 5 crews or something like this, but I kind of saw this recently. They have a full-on digital twin of their 2 cars, where they feed all this information that they're kind of getting through, and all of these pieces in this car obviously kind of connected, right?
Yeah.
There's something isn't working out, it will have a knock-on effect on something else, and suddenly, boom, you lose the kind of race.
Yeah.
And they use it actually tactically in the race to figure out which tires to put on, when to come up. Do they still gas up cars, by the way? I'm not sure if that's
No, I don't think so.
But like all kinds of like tactical things. They're using this to run those simulations, right? I think you can, adjust all kinds of things in this fucking car, right? And basically, kind of, there's so many inputs.
Yeah.
How do you know which one will actually be the most optimal? And therefore, they have the digital twin that does that.
Yeah.
They can try it out.
And so the funny thing is, without knowing it, a bunch of the listeners, they're going to have some kind of a digital twin, because
Is it creepy now or what?
Not of themselves, of the business, right? So they're going to have maybe a BI dashboard somewhere. They're going to have a spreadsheet with some kind of conversion rate logic. What in essence they're trying to do is build a digital twin of how the business performs.
And I think in our world, what's pretty good is we already have all the sensors in place, right?
Yeah.
We don't need to go out and climb on the windmill, kind of the rotor, and kind of attach something. It's already there, and the sensors are basically our business tools.
Yeah.
Right. This is where we're kind of recording all of the things that are being done on the go-to-market side. Right. We're not saying, hey, you should have a twin for the whole business. I'm not sure if we're there yet, technically, as a society, I would say. But the basic kind of for the go-to-market side, over the last 10, 20 years, everyone has been installing lots of business tools across the funnel that basically kind of, create a bunch of data.
Yeah.
And that bunch of data now can be used as input to your digital twin, right? And I would actually say that a BI dashboard doesn't qualify as that because it does lack the logic of these different pieces. I think if there's... I think kind of when you look at this, the closest is what's happening in your head about the go-to-market engine. Kind of that's kind of, it's not a digital, it's I guess an organic twin that's in your head. Or like thinking through, how this thing might work out, right? It's number one. Number two is some kind of a broken spreadsheet that you have hanging somewhere. And those are to a degree representations of the go-to-market business that you're running.
Exactly. So the first step, it's a digital twin. We can also call it a model. A revenue model is something other people use as a term as well, right? What does it consist of?
I mean, it's pretty straightforward. It basically kind of has it has the different funnel pieces in there, right? Kind of that's a way to structure that twin, right? And there you then need to decide of how deep you want to go. Do you want to do every single step? Do you want to have monitoring stops in between? Do you want to split it in all kinds of different, we would say, cuts or dimensions? But the funnel is one piece. I think the other one is people. So all the different resources working on this.
Yeah.
And there's some that are super close to it, like SDRs and AEs, right? That's very close to it. Then you have pieces that maybe a bit further removed. Maybe your social media manager or your designer or something like this. They're kind of part of it, but to a degree they're removed, right? They're not a direct input. And then lastly, you will have things like costs.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the funnel itself, the digital twin, doesn't come for cheap. Generating all of that, the twin needs to understand that some of these pieces cost you money, right? And especially that is then, if you have those inputs together, that is then really what enables you to create pretty strong decision making around this, right? Kind of just to understand these things. We sometimes call it kind of a what if scenario, or you can poke holes into things and hey, how does this work? How does this work? Instead of you thinking and trying to think through these pieces, which I think a lot of us are doing, it's like, if we change this thing over there, then I need to kind of keep this other thing over here in mind. And having kind of a twin doing these things for you without making the same mistakes, so to speak.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of one pretty straightforward input here. And then the other piece is planning, forecasting, monitoring.
Yeah.
I think those are the three main pieces you can actually do with the digital twin of your go-to-market engine. We're going to talk about this in a little bit more, but basically kind of bunch of actual business applications coming out of this that are very far removed from this, like, oh, cool, a twin.
Yeah. But I mean, we had Arun Mani from Pleo, he's CRO there on the show, and he also talked about they had built a predictive people model, which is, essentially a digital twin of part of the business, which is one model, and enable them to ensure that they have the capacity at any point in time, accounting for people going on paternity, maternity, on sick leave, leavers, promotions, and stuff like that, right? So that's pretty essential, especially when you're operating a larger team, which I imagine they are, right? That you maintain the capacity to close enough deals. And it's the same with the SDRs, it's the same with marketing, it's the same. So that is the power. And it gets pretty complicated quite fast. And you do need to update the model because things change. We've seen it this year. Some of the conversion rates, if you think they're going to keep being at the level they've always been, they might change, right? So that model also needs to be kind of calibrated every once in a while.
Yeah, and I mean, we maybe this is more on the execution part, but think about this windmill that, hey, there's suddenly more wind, but the windmill isn't spinning as the twin expected it to. If you didn't have this comparison on the side, you wouldn't know.
Yeah.
And I think what we've seen over the past year is a lot of less and less wind, out there. And those windmills are kind of behaving completely differently than as they should. And kind of seeing that before they completely break down, right? Kind of that's extremely useful.
So that's basically the digital twin. And you said one of the other keywords, which is planning. Should we start there?
Yeah. So once you have this thing in place, right, and it's really a representation of your go-to-market in code, so to speak, right? Then you can start using it as a, sometimes we say as a bottom-up planning tool.
Yeah.
You shouldn't be caring about where you want to go, right? It's not the model's fault that you can't hit those goals that are being set, right? Kind of that's really important to keep in mind. But what you can then start doing is you can start adding all of these things that you would do in reality in order to achieve something, right?
Yeah.
You could hire some people, you could execute some initiatives, you would do all kinds of things with the business, but you can actually do it with a twin, and then the twin kind of spits out where are we most likely to end up.
Yeah.
And you know what? This is going to be your bottom up revenue planning forecast, whatever you want to call it, but that's the most likely number you're actually going to hit if you do all of these things, and if all of these things actually happen like they used to, or they happen like you want them to, right? And that then gives you the ability to have a fairly strong, good conversation with the CFO on how the top down and bottom up is landing.
Yeah.
Arun was talking about this in a very similar manner, actually. He was in that case, he was basically going through, hey, here are all the things that we want to see change.
Yeah.
And basically had a list of, I wouldn't say hires, but initiatives and so forth. And then was talking about, well, let's go through them one by one. Instead of talking about the end result, which is really diffuse and difficult, and it's going to be a non-helpful conversation, let's go through it one by one. What are the things we want to do? And are they realistic to do? Are they funded? By when? And so forth, right? And as he then walked through this with the CFO and, strikes things out or adds some things, that then gives him more or less the agreed end result, right?
Yeah.
And that end result will be usually less than what the CFO wants, but it will be kind of something that they can agree on, right? So ultimately, this is about, planning for hiring,
Yeah.
planning for demand, and then in essence doing resource allocation around that, right?
Yeah.
What are the and a resource is hiring someone, but a resource can also be RevOps team spending time on a problem. It can be enablement being hired, but then deployed towards an initiative and so forth. There can be so many things, but it's really important to make sure that they're resourced in the end of the day.
Yeah. So maybe also just to simplify it for the listener, because I think sometimes the digital twin and all that stuff, it can get a bit complicated. But just imagine you think about hiring 5 SDRs in February and being able to know, well, it's going to take you 2.5 months to ramp them. And then they're on average going to book this amount of meeting, resulting in this amount of deal at this point in time at this value. That is a super simple way to look at the power of having that twin.
So absolutely. And I would say for this example, it's like running a paper windmill in your backyard.
Yeah.
Do you need a digital twin for that? No. Like that's just silly. No one sits there and attaches a little sensor to all of it. It's like, oh, there's too much.
You get a smartwatch.
There's
so we
too
can
much
monitor.
wind here, and suddenly there's leaves falling from the trees, and it destroys the paper. So that kind of stuff, you don't need the sophisticated tooling for.
No.
Let's just kind of be honest, right? So if you have 5 SDRs you want to hire in January and so forth, everyone with a piece of paper and a pen can kind of figure this out. I think where this really becomes interesting, and that's why it's also, yes, it is a bit more complex.
Yeah.
I think for sure is when this operation gets just bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, right? And there's a good conversation to be had. Well, is it at the point of where Rune is running things like with 100 million, or is it a thing that is for 1 billion, or is it a thing for 10 million, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's somewhere in that spectrum, also depending on the organization, where okay, wait a minute, those 5 SDRs in January, that's not really my problem.
No.
Yes, if I abstract it all the way back, really Arun's problem is he has 5 SDRs in January. That's the problem. But it's really times a gazillion.
Yeah.
And when something reaches a complexity level, and when the impact is so important, I think then, somewhere in that spectrum, you're going to need to make the jump, right?
Yeah.
And you need to, figure out yourself, are you a paper windmill or are you a windmill farm that's offshore, basically fueling Denmark right now, right? And there's just a difference between those two.
I think it's also, especially when you want to look at a full cycle of closing a deal just from the very beginning, there's a lot of steps in between on that journey, which inherently makes it really hard to do in a spreadsheet. You need to account for time and conversion rates and what segments are we talking about, and that makes it super difficult, right? And I just want to point out that this is actually critical for you to know what to execute and what to prioritize, which is the first step of ensuring a solid go-to-market execution, right? This is why that part matters a great deal.
And so I was just recently talking with a CRO about, and yes, it was kind of a sales conversation, but basically we were talking about the go-to-market execution piece. And through that conversation, also for her, it suddenly became so crystal clear. Well, you need to have a great plan first, or a good plan, at least a solid plan. You need to have that first, because if you don't have an expectation where you want to tilt the engine, it's really difficult to do good execution around it. Because what are you comparing things to?
Yeah,
right. It's like let's stay with the windmill. I don't know how it got to this thing
now.
But if there's a lot of wind coming, then you expect this windmill to rotate faster, right? But this rotation is only okay if there's a lot of wind coming.
Yeah.
If you don't expect so much wind coming and the rotation is kind of happening like this, something is going wrong, right? So in order to set yourself up to actually manage the whole engine in the right way, you need to kind of say, okay, there are a couple of expectations we're having about the future. And those expectations could be completely, okay, I think we can hire 5 people. It can also be much more guided, being like, okay, we want to grow to 25 million. Here are the expectations we have in order to kind of get to 25 million, right?
Yeah.
If we hit all of these on the hat, if the dashboard is green all along the way, we will hit the 25 million.
Yeah.
If there are things starting to be red and redder and even worse, then we're probably not, right? And that's kind of the idea you want to have. And sometimes, and we're talking about digital twinning, let's make it a little bit more complex. Sometimes we've been, comparing this almost to observability.
Yeah.
So you have in your software stack tons of things that are happening. You have servers running. You have, I don't know, lots of complicated pieces, right? And then there are a bunch of companies offering observability for that stack. And basically what it does is it scans all of these different things and then, looks for outliers. It's like, where's something shooting up? Where's something shooting down or whatever? And then when they happen, they're kind of, hey, here's something going on. Pretty useful, pretty straightforward, right? But in a go-to-market world, you actually don't want to know about the outliers. You want to know about the trajectory, right? Kind of, are you expected for this? Are you expected for this to increase or not, right? And if it does, but it doesn't, well, then something needs to trigger and say like, hey, here's something wrong, right? So you really need to kind of, you could say in an AI world, you want to train your twin a little bit. You want to give that twin a bit of an understanding and context of the future for kind of making the right decisions, kind of triggering you. And I think that's what the planning piece where it comes in, where it's kind of really important.
So once you have a model, a twin, and a plan in place, what's the next step to secure great execution?
So I think this is where almost the ritual and the tradition around that needs to be built, right? Kind of, you need to do all the things you need to do anyway. So let's just kind of be clear about that. But actually, what you can do now is week over week, day over day, month over month, doesn't matter. You can clearly see where the areas that we are executing as planned, where the areas where that doesn't happen, right? And if you have that codified in not a spreadsheet that sits somewhere in the corner that updates once a month, but daily, suddenly you can use it as an operational tool. And once you use it as an operational tool, you'll have all the different participants in this go-to-market piece, which is, it's not the AEs and the CSMs, but it's their leaders. Or you as a CRO, your lieutenants and their lieutenants, basically go in and see, where are we doing the right things? Where are we not doing the right things according to the plan that we set, right? And you basically kind of give them the ability to sleep a little bit better at night because they don't need to worry every time they walk into an MBR, QBR and get like whacked over their head. But number two, when things happening, they can proactively take action. It's like, okay, there's something down here in the corner. It's Jackie's fault or whatever. Doesn't matter if it's her fault or not. But you can say like, hey, Jackie, what's going on here? It's like, oh, actually this demo form in APAC broke. And now we saw it and we are fixing it now, right? And what you then can use that whole knowledge for is like in an aggregated fashion in your, I would say your CRO meetings to make sure, hey, does everyone have their eyes on the ball? Is it very clear where we're kind of going, where we're not going? And, based on the latest forecast coming out of all of that stuff, what is the twin expecting to happen going forward? Is there anything we need to kind of account for going forward now? Right? And then drive your conversation around that. And especially then, once you kind of land in that world of, okay, this is how it should be going, you almost also want to have the twin tell you, well, if this is happening like that, how much money is that actually? Right? So I had myself multiple executive meetings where you spend half an hour, 45 minutes talking about some shitty webinar campaign that didn't go as planned, while spending 5 minutes on the hiring issue that we have on the SDR side, as an example, right? And I would have, yes, in my head it was there, and no one else's head it was like this, but I would have loved a tool to just tell me, hey, listen, this webinar problem they're talking about that you're like wasting 45 minutes on, you're ultimately talking about one deal. You're talking about $20,000 by the end of the quarter. This hiring problem you have over here is $150,000 by the end of next quarter.
Yeah.
So which problem should you be spending more time on actually, right? And that's that having that help, that it's not just sitting in your head, but in everyone's head, so to speak, and having clarity, kind of what are the real big issues we need to work on and spend time on. Extremely helpful, because that in essence enables you to hit those targets, right?
Yeah.
Kind of it helps you, where should you be spending the time with your team, focusing in on these, fixing those things, treating it almost like a task list.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, there's this issue now. We need this thing to be green next time we talk.
Yeah.
And if it's not, then when is it going to be green? And you need to be pushing this thing until it's okay again, right?
Yeah.
And, we sometimes talked about this, and this was also kind of talked to another CEO the other day. The solution is not always where the problem is.
No.
It could be that, yes, you have a hiring issue over there, and it's tearing a hole of $500,000 into your forecast for the rest of the year. But there might be a way to find $500,000 somewhere else. And that's basically kind of where then this forecasting comes in, right?
Yeah.
So yes, you have your plan, and there will be some magical point of time where your financial plan and your go-to-market plan are fully aligned. And then in the next second, they will start to drift away. And it's going to be your go-to-market, and then we call it a forecast. The go-to-market forecast will be the more reliable things, because it relies on up-to-date information, both fresh data coming from the sensors, but also you as a team sitting there and doing some updates to the twin. Is like, well, I don't think that hire is going to start here. I think it's going to start over there. I think these things are actually not going to go like we planned. They're going to be slightly different. And then the twin basically kind of adjusts and kind of gives you the new forecast, right? And having that ability and that conversation and being so precise about that, that basically kind of helps you to hit your targets at the end of the day.
I mean, so it's such a powerful tool to have, yet I've been in those situations where someone shows you their model in a spreadsheet. It's like, can you see that this is how we need to do it? You just like cell B5. And then we're home, and you're like, what is this magical wonderland I'm looking at on the screen? I have no clue, right? It's someone else's logic. It can make it really difficult. So I think it is an essential tool to have, because it's great for decision making and understanding whether you're in marketing, sales, or CS. If you need to make an impact, what are your options, and how do you kind of decide at the end of the day? But you kind of need to have the knowledge of how the model works, and actually whether it's a spreadsheet or you buy Roblox doesn't matter. Those leaders, they need to know how.
No,
how
absolutely.
it runs.
And I think the way I'm sometimes seeing it is like, when you have a fairly straightforward setup, I think you don't even need to have a spreadsheet. I think it is in your head, and I think it works out. I think at some point you will start scribbling something in the spreadsheet.
Yeah.
And then at some point, and at least CEOs will know this, when they open up the spreadsheet and they just see the mess.
Yeah.
And they're like, you know what? That's too late now.
Yeah.
We've gone over. Kind of, this is, I think, where you need to have a more robust solution for this, right? And I think the main downsides when using spreadsheets in this sense is really the inability to collaborate, share, and so forth, right?
Yeah.
So for many reasons, not everyone is as literate in spreadsheets as someone else, and then it basically becomes a useless tool, right? It's not being used.
But I think there's more than that, right? Because what's gonna happen eventually as we start the new year, Q2, 3, whatever, someone is gonna face a challenge. And the first task is to understand what is even happening, right? And if you don't have a model already there, it's going to take you longer to get to the root cause, right? And it's just so essential to be able to define then how do you solve it at the end of the day. And that's where if you don't have a setup, you're going to have to do some custom work, and RevOps is going to spend 1 to 2 weeks, get back to you, and you've lost an immense amount of time in fixing a problem.
Yeah, but one of my favorite problems in this context is, by the way, let's just say you miss target. And then there's this whole finger pointing happening.
Yeah.
Whose fault is it?
Yeah.
Is it marketing? Is it, sales and so forth? And what's pretty cool when you have like a twin kind of on the side, you can basically kind of figure out, well, we missed by $1 million. But $600K was because of our sales execution. So let's say CVRs, ACVs, I don't know, was trailing behind. You can say 700K was because of the MQLs and some conversion rate, whatever. Now we're, 1.3 million above, basically. So or below. But then you might have some other areas in the twin that are positive.
Yeah. Yeah.
That actually take it from the 1.3 down to the 1 million miss.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
And how are you going to have a conversation about this? Because what you really want to do, it's not about blame or anything like this, but it's about root cause. You don't want to whack people over their heads, but you want to have a conversation. It's like, well, the problem why we're not hitting is there. And yes, you're responsible.
Yeah.
And that means you need to start going and fixing it, right? But if you have this constant finger pointing in a completely diffuse world where, yes, you didn't hit target and it's binary, you either do, you don't, how do you know where in the funnel was actually the problem? And where do you know how much of it was the case, right?
Yeah.
It's like when you have a car accident, and like just a smaller one in a city or something like this. Yes, someone was running, I don't know, around the corner a little bit too fast, but the other one kind of didn't look and so forth. And then there's a huge law fight, at least in Germany, I'm not sure how it works, to basically kind of say like, if you run a red light, you're 100% guilty, period. But then there's so many thousands of examples where it's kind of not that clear. And in Germany, very often it's like, well, it's 50-50.
Yeah.
Both of you, it's both of your fault.
Yeah.
Both of you fucked up to a little bit of a degree.
Yeah.
And you want to have the same system when you go to market. You want to be like, well, to a degree, it's not all of us. All of us messed up, right? Kind of sure, yes, have that message and have that conversation, but that's not going to help you with great go-to-market execution.
No.
You want to have a good understanding who messed up by how much and why, and let's go fix it.
I think there's a more fundamental piece, which is, could you have uncovered that problem sooner? Right? We talk about it. You don't want to sit in QBR and figure out, we should have fixed that in week 2 when the quarter began. And I think that's the other dimension. When you have that twin, you can see it really early what's happening, and then you can decide, right? What are the course corrections you as a team need to make?
I actually believe that those QBRs will kind of die. Because right now, the reason why you do a QBR on a quarterly level is because there's a lot of work. And the reason why many people say they do a QBR but don't is because it's too much work. Right? They don't end up doing it. But if you have the same logic of a QBR daily happening for you, why would you sit there on a quarterly level?
Yeah.
And you know what? You should you should have the conversation and the focus and blah, blah, blah. We talked about this and it's totally there. But I think, once the laziness of people sets in, it's like, why don't we be discussing the same numbers that we've been tracking and fixing and changing? Like, why would I do this? It feels like a post-mortem when I had this right there when it happened.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So I think those are some probably non-obvious ways to address execution. When you think about it, because usually it will be a lot on the tactical level. This is basically about having a digital twin that enables you to spot some of the challenges. You talked a bit about observability, which is, just as an example, is Datadog.
Yes.
Massive company you might have heard of. They're big on this, but for engineering teams.
Yep.
Right? So it should totally be a thing you consider for your go-to-market as well.
That's it. And we talked about digital twinning. Once you have that thing set up, do a proper plan, and then basically kind of using this digital twin that is trained now with your plan to help you make the right decision. And yes, you need to still, make all the phone calls. You need to fire the people. You need to hire the people. You need to be a leader and all of that stuff. But this kind of gives you a backbone to really, make decisions with confidence and execute like a rock star.
Wow.
Maybe there was too much energy in the end.
Probably it was.
Thanks everyone for listening.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mikkel.
Bye.